Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. I'm your host Pushottam, and in today's video, we are going to talk about this concept of undying motivation. Like, as to what is the secret to undying motivation. Now, if you are someone who has read self-help literature or probably you have binge watched a couple of motivational videos, you will realize one very funny thing about motivation, that when you read it for the very first time, or you are exposed to content which is uplifting, you feel good for some moments or probably a couple of days, but after some time all the motivation dies down. Now we'll go into how we can sort of fix this and understand the very notion, the very understanding of motivation, because oftentimes what we are considering motivation is need not necessarily mean motivation. It could also be delusional. Now let me give you some context. Now when we look at the modern day new age motivational speakers, one thing you'll realize is there's a lot of euphoria, there's a lot of excitement when we hear them talk about a lot of things. But unless knowledge, a content, is doing you justice in terms of creating a sync between your own mind and with reality, that is nothing but delusion. Understand this, that spiritual knowledge or anything which is uplifting and which is something which is true to the core and is authentic will not make you an optimist. It will not make you an optimist. Just pay attention to the words I just spoke. It will not make you an optimist nor a pessimist. It will essentially make you a realist. Now, realist is a person who is grounded with reality, but he also has awareness through look at different paradigms, different perspectives. Now, when we talk about achieving a state wherein we are excited and motivated 24/7, firstly realize this. If we are someone who is going to be in a state of constancy 24/7, we probably are dead. The reason why the heartbeat constantly fluctuates is because we are alive. The very nature of life, the very signature which denotes that a person is alive, is fluctuating. So it's a foolish and an unrealistic expectation to have that someone will always be motivated 24/7. Now, the reason why this expectation or this desire even sort of brings about in our consciousness is because we go through a lot of shifts in our consciousness. One day we are at the peak, another day we are at the pit bottom. Now, we need to address that instead of focusing on a very ambiguous or a very stupid realization or a stupid desire that I'm going to be motivated 24/7. That is not possible, and it's a foolish way to function. Only the dead can be constant. If you are a human being, you will go through the different hues of emotional bandwidths. The different polarities of emotions is what makes human a human. But what is spiritual discipline, spiritual knowledge, uplifting content, which is authentic and is coming from a genuine source, what it does to you, it sort of helps you in bouncing back. It helps you in reducing that lag which normal people or an average Joe will probably not be able to jump or bounce back at a quicker pace with a lot of authentic force in it. Now, there are three aspects which I would like to cover in this video, which will essentially bring us to this state of having a sense of motivation, but that motivation is not cosmetic, wherein you are always showcasing how motivated you are. This motivation which I am referring to is very realistic. At the same time, it keeps you grounded and in sync with reality. Because if you are not in sync with reality, if you are in your own la-la land, because you think that you have read a couple of books and you feel that you can always uplift yourself and be delusional, that is not the right way to approach uplifting content. And spiritual knowledge and anything which is truly spiritual will always encourage you to face reality instead of finding escape routes in fake optimism. Now, coming to the first point which I would like to address. Now, this is a little deep point, and I would like to back this point through a real life study which was done by Columbia University in the year 1998. So, Columbia University did a very fascinating and intriguing study. So, the study, what they did was they had two group of children around age 8 to 10 years. So they had classified these two group of children, they had sort of compartmentalized these two group of children, and both of these children were exposed to intriguing puzzles which sort of challenged their intellectual capacity. They were given a lot of puzzling questions, puzzles to solve in a stipulated amount of time. This was the task which both these group of students were given. Let's call these two groups as Group A and Group B. Now, after they did this exercise, they brought up the results, and for both the group, the children who had performed exceedingly well, meaning they had solved most of the puzzles ranging from easy to difficult, both of them were approached differently. To the Group A students who had done exceedingly well, they were told that the reason you are able to solve the puzzle is because you are gifted, you are intelligent. They were told that you are intelligent, that's the reason you are able to solve the puzzle. Now, Group B students were told the reason you are able to solve the puzzle is because you are hardworking by demeanor, by nature. Now, after this, something very interesting happened which blew the mind of the researchers there. In the second category or in the second series of puzzles, both the groups were subjected to a more difficult level of puzzles. Now, these results were really astonishing. What they found out was the group which was told that you are naturally gifted, you are naturally intelligent, as a result of which you are able to solve the puzzles, those were the group of children who performed poorly. They were not able to solve a lot of puzzles, and in fact, they let go of a lot of puzzles. They let it be unattempted. They let it go and they didn't even bother to pay attention to those puzzles. And even if they did pay attention to a couple of problems, they were unsuccessful in solving them. Whereas in Group 2, the students, because they were told that the reason you solved it because you're hardworking by demeanor, they were able to solve the puzzle. Now, what does this study tell, and what is the conclusion? What was the conclusion which the scientists derived from this experiment? They said that people who always shirk from absolute personal responsibility are the people who always lack motivation in life. Recently, I have been reading literature from Stoicism. Stoicism is basically the thought process, the philosophies of the Greek emperors, the mighty Greek emperors, and what was their bent of mind. It's a philosophy which is heavily focused on the premise or on the thought process that what are the things which are under the control of a human being and what are the things which are not within our control. The circle of concern, which is heavily talked about in management lectures, is the prime focus, is the key focus of the philosophy of Stoicism. Now, if you look at this experiment which Columbia University had done, you'll realize this, that the students who were programmed or who were conditioned by this thought process that the reason you were successful was not because you were naturally gifted, was because you were able to work hard. Now, these are the people who essentially were even able to or even motivated to attempt those puzzles. Now, this is a very fascinating experiment and it talks about a lot of different aspects, and the prime aspect is the people who take absolute personal responsibilities are the people who never feel drain in motivation. The people who cry about a lack of motivation are the people who don't understand a clear demarcation between things which they can control and things which they cannot control. And this is the reason which leads to frustration. This is the prime reason which leads to anxiety. And this is beautifully talked about in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. There is nothing which is not talked about in Srimad Bhagavad Gita which the people are not validating or substantiating with scientific experiments. Krishna talked about in the Bhagavad Gita that focus on your work and forget the results. Because let's understand, the results are bound to n number of factors. There are so many things in the equation and not everything is under our control. But the only thing which is under our control is our full effort. The best is only under our control. The best effort, the best action at that moment of time is the only thing which comes under the realm or which comes under our jurisdiction of choice. All the other aspects is something which we cannot handle, or is something which we cannot claim control over. And when we try to claim control over these things, this is a recipe of stress, this is a recipe of anxiety. So this is the first point, which is something we all need to think about the circle of concern and what is the circle of control. And when we start focusing and sort of gain back the energy which we have given to the things which are out of our control, we are in a better position and we can sort of focus our entire energy on the things which we can control. And as a result of that, automatically the probability or the chances of you succeeding in your endeavor are higher versus a person who's constantly fretting about results, and because he's constantly fretting about the results, he's constantly anxious about the results, he is not able to perform at his peak. Is not able to give his 100% to the task. Now, in the experiment which happened, the group of children who were told that you are naturally gifted. So there came a feeling of complacency. There came a feeling of taking things for granted, as a result of which they didn't put a lot of effort in even looking at those problems and solving them. This is what happens when most of us think that this personal responsibility which most of us don't want to take, and we are always dependent on motivation from outside, and when something is not happening the way we want it, we lose motivation because we are always looking for sources of motivation and inspiration from outside. And when we direct the compass of motivation within us, then this is going to be a boundless source of motivation, because now your motivation is not a slave to outside sources, but is coming from a place which is deep within. And that is always going to be within you, with you forever. Now let's go to the second point. Now the second point is also very instrumental in understanding or sort of having a mindset of motivation. The secret of motivation is to have a motive. Without a motive, you cannot have motivation. Now, this is a no-brainer. This is very evident. But most of us don't have a motive in life. I mean, if you ask someone what is the motive of their life, they probably don't have a well-crafted answer. Because most of us don't think in these terms. We are always about survival. We are always about acquiring things so that we can enjoy, and there's nothing wrong in that. But what is the underlying theme of our life? What is the central theme of our life? Not many people can think about it. There's a beautiful Zen story which I would like to share in this context. Now, this Zen story is about a dog and a lion. It so happens that a dog, he sort of, when he looks his master and the master is having a pile of bones, and every time this master throws a bone on the dog with a lot of enthusiasm and excitement catches hold of the bone. And this goes on for a very long time, and each time the bone is thrown at the dog with a lot of enthusiasm and the constant level of enthusiasm catches the bone. Now, the same thing is done in front of a lion. A pile of bones is presented in front of a lion, and the same person is throwing bones at a place where the lion can easily access it. But the lion seems absolutely disinterested in those bones. It is just giving a very lazy look to those bones. Now, what does this mean, right? What is this story trying to tell us? The lion can see a live person who is filled with a lot of bones, and that interests the lion more versus these small bones which the dog is interested. Now, this story is symbolic and has a very deep and a very interesting meaning. Most of us are so consumed by distractions that we are all like that, we are somewhere unconsciously behaving like that dog, wherein we see that bone and we are just wanting to catch that. But a lion is a man of vision. A lion is a man who has a great motive. He always looks for the big picture. But the dog is not able to look at the big picture. He is only interested in those small bones. But a lion has a vision. And because of that, he is disinterested in those small bones. Now, what are those small bones symbolic of in our life? The distractions which we all so easily get consumed by, the social media notifications, the entertainment drives, right? The entertainment things which sort of are always looking for our attention. It is beautifully talked about in the Bhagavad Gita. There is a chapter on Vairagya. So Vairagya is not something only confined to ascetics or people who are aspiring for monkhood, but Vairagya is something which every average Joe can benefit from. It gives you a razor sharp amount of focus, and the focus can only come when we have a larger vision for life, a larger motive. If you want to be like that lion who's aiming for a bigger piece of meat versus the dog who is lured by small temptations, the small temptations of distractions, which most of us are getting lured by. Because the reason we are getting lured by those small temptations is we don't have a bigger motive. We don't have the eyes of the lion, the visionary eyes of the lion. There's a beautiful quote by Greek philosopher Epictetus, which is fitting this context very well, and I would like to quote him. He says, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Now, this quote is sort of connecting both the 2 points which we talked about. The circle of control is basically talking about things which are in our control and also which is out of our control. And the greatest freedom is to be free from the slavish dependencies of distraction, the cheap dopamine kicks which these things of distraction give us. They are all interrelated. And when we have a higher motive, a grand vision, a lofty goal, all these small bones of distraction automatically fall off, and we feel a sort of a disenchantment with these allurements. Hope this message really brought about a new narrative, a new paradigm of thought process. Now, coming to point number 3, and this point number 3 is probably the most important thing which most of us ignore. Point number 3 is association is the key. Now, what is association? It is said that by the end of 5 years, at your next 5 years, is heavily going to be influenced, or the kind of person you are going to be after 5 years is heavily going to be influenced by the top 5 people you associate with most of the time in your day. Now, when we hear this point, we suddenly come up with a lot of negative resistance, saying that not everyone is gifted with great associations. Now, I'll tell you something very interesting, and this is a scientific research and something which is brought about by observation. If you look at any billionaire or any titan in industry, there's one thing which is common among all of them. Right from childhood, these people were ardent readers. Now, not everyone is born in a family where there are a lot of visionaries. Everyone is born in an average family, and not everyone is having that divine association. So, does that mean we should not have or we should not aim for that kind of association or company? We can always take the help of great books. Because understand that when you're reading a book, you're just not reading a book, you're having a conversation with the author. The experiences of that author, the learnings from his life guide the reader to navigate the challenges of his own life. So that is association in itself. And when you are associating or when you are viewing mindless entertainment, which should be a part, not a very prominent part of our life, but sadly it has become a part of our life, then automatically you become like those characters. Now, this might be very interesting, but this is what research has told. This is why when Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, when they were having a common lunch, both of them were asked, what is the number one reason for your success? And they said one word, they said focus. Now focus is very important, but how will you develop focus? You will only develop focus when you are surrounded with people who talk about having a focus. If you are surrounded with people who gossip and complain, who talk everything about the world, but they don't talk anything about any idea, they are only focused on what's happening in someone else's life versus how to improve their own life versus how to cultivate their life and evolve themselves in any dimension of their life. If you surround yourself with these kind of people, then you are also going to be bound by them. Marcus Aurelius, the great Greek philosopher, told, the best revenge you can take with anyone is to not be like them. The best revenge to take with anyone is to not be like them. And whenever you are indulging in talks, in conversations of people who don't resonate with you, you are essentially inviting them in your own consciousness, and as a result of that, sooner or later you are bound to become like them. The reason why I told association is the key is, you can have a lot of understanding of what is in your control and what is not under your control. You can also have a grand vision. But if you don't have the right association or the right peer circle, you will never develop the habits required to walk on these pathways. And sooner or later, the motivation is going to die down. Because our habits, our influences are heavily triggered through associations. Our desires are created by associations. If you have a couple of friends who are too much into drinking or alcohol and smoking, even though you are a great person, you will succumb to those temptations unless you are not a very powerfully poised personality. If you are a powerfully poised personality, a personality who has a lot of spiritual character and depth, then you will influence those people. Now, let's take the example of Srila Prabhupada. Now, Srila Prabhupada, he goes to United States and he is surrounded with people who are drug addicts and he transforms them completely. Now, you and me are not Srila Prabhupada, we are average people, right? And so we need to be very mindful of our own associations, the kind of content we consume. All of them have subtle influences in our characters, in our thought processes, in our belief systems, and ultimately our whole personality. Hope this video brought a lot of sense. We talked about a lot of different topics, and the main focus of this video was to address this concept of motivation, because we are all sooner or later are wanting towards that source of motivation, and mostly we want this source of motivation when we are feeling low. But understand this, no amount of outer motivation will quench the thirst of inner motivation. And even if it quenches the thirst, it will only be temporary for a limited amount of time. And if there is one thing which can quench the thirst for all the questions which is captivated or which sort of is always a question to mankind, the answers to all those questions lies in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Thank you so much for your time on my video. If you really liked my video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Subscribe to my channel. Also don't forget to give me your candid feedback as to what are the things which you liked in my video and what are the things which I can improve on. Thank you so much, and I'll meet you in the next video.